being the first guy through the wall is typically the bloodiest, and we are the first person or the first company in Canada offering an instrument like this, especially in our micro cap space. And so it's it's reminiscent of us going public a couple years ago. We were the first non-custodial Bitcoin company to go public, which was a host of problems and costs and legals and accounting, regulations. And now we're the first ones to be offering this type of instrument. And I think that over the next 5 years, this will be commonplace.
Shout out to the Orange Manufacturing Group. They helped me with my logo design, and you know that I'll be ordering their premium hardwood sign and lightning keychain. Accessories are curated from a selection of durable traditional materials built to last. Use the Geyser Fund link in the show notes to take advantage of their trust minimal process, or to save 5%, go to omg21btc.com. That's omg21btc.com and use code AAB21Q. Can I tell you that I wanted to call this Ask Adam O'Brien from Bitcoin Well, aka the Canadian Michael Saylor, 21 questions.
It's an honor. We've been getting a lot. I've been getting a lot of that lately, which is exciting. I mean, obviously he's a huge goat in the industry. So yeah. The Canadian version. That means I'm smaller, colder, and I don't know what else. Probably
younger,
nicer, more
nicer,
apologetic,
more handsome.
Just because I'm younger for now. Although I think that Saylor, we're like watching him age right now. Because when you're in Bitcoin in the public sphere, it just ages you. There's just no way around it.
Yeah, totally. 1 week in Bitcoin is like a year anywhere
Literally.
else.
I was in a Twitter argument with someone who disagreed with Bitcoin, blah, blah, blah. We were going back and forth about economic policy, and I was, talking to him about why like fair market incentives are better, blah, blah, blah. And then I went, I was kind of snarky, and I was like, but what do I know? I'm just because he called me like a crypto bro or something like that. And I was like, I'm just a young crypto bro, like kind of like being, self-deprecating. And then he responded back so unexpectedly. He said, you don't look that young.
Oh.
And I was like, oh.
Age is just a number. That. Yeah.
Yeah. I have now entered into the middle-aged phase of life, I suppose.
Welcome to the club. And when you have kids as well, that is like, it's like compounding. It's exponential. Age just goes.
Totally. And we, we were young when we had our first kid. And so with my oldest, I'm kind of usually the youngest dad in the room at like the hockey games and at the, like the school and whatever. And then now with my oldest, that's kind of been my identity my whole life is I'm the young guy in the room. I was the young entrepreneur. I was the young dad. I was the young married guy. Like, it's kind of the young guy. And with my youngest son now, who's 6 years younger than my oldest, I'm not the young, I'm not the young buck in the room anymore. So I'm definitely experiencing this in real time, how the age thing works.
You're part of the experienced parents. So today on the show on Ask a Bitcoiner 21 Questions, we're going to do something different. We're just going to go with it. We had a few technical problems to start, and I thank you again so much for your patience. So I'm just going to do my little rundown. We are starting at block height, 875,315. The current market price of Bitcoin in US dollars is 104,620, and sats per dollar is 956 for a total market capitalization of $2.07 trillion.
Crazy. Hearing the sats per dollar, that is the best metric I find because it's very difficult to do a conversion back to dollars with that metric, and you want that number to go down, which is just so like classic Bitcoin, aligning the incentives and getting your mind on straight. It's so good.
So one thing I wonder is measuring hash rate through the unit of exahash per second. I'm wondering if we will ever get to like, I don't know, 750 sats per dollars, 750 or whatever exahash per second. It is kind of a nerdy, like, desire to have, but I think it'd be really cool to get.
You know what? And I feel like that's the way that Bitcoin works is it kind of plays into those like meme, prophecy type numbers. Like when what was it? When Tesla hit 420 per share or whatever, and it's like it's just we've got a certain way of looking at things as humans, and you can almost will it into existence. I
Right?
don't think I fully believe in like the like the human being, but I do think that we as humans we can probably make any stat or any series of stats in our heads to then like, show off in the real world. So it's yeah, it's funny.
Most definitely. So, Adam, for the few people in the land of Bitcoin who don't know who you are, the very few, can you introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, so I'm Adam O'Brien. I am the founder and CEO at Bitcoin Well. I'm a co-founder at GetBased. Bitcoin Well is a Bitcoin platform in Canada and USA. We're kind of looking to be the conduit between fiat and Bitcoin and self-custody. So what that means, like in Canada especially, you can pay your bills in Bitcoin. You can buy and sell Bitcoin with money from your bank. We've got some light account stuff, which means you can kind of preserve your privacy. And ultimately, we're on a mission to enable independence. And so anything you can do with Bitcoin and self-custody, we want to allow you to do it, whether that be paying your bills or buying coffee or sending money to a friend or whatever it may be. And then at GetBased, I was lucky to be a co-founder with Isa and Julian this year, and we're on a mission to awaken the sovereign individual. And we do that by telling stories in a fearless fashion. And whether that be through Julian's content, his shorts and documentaries, Isabella has BTC Isla and then I do Future Proof, and we kind of wanted to join our efforts and make our shows. And then, ultimately I think that media is changing and the money is
Yeah.
changing, and media as a whole. I mean, we went from, centralized media into decentralized media, but then kind of back into centralization. And I think
Hmm.
it's so important that we awaken that sovereign individual. As a society, we have to call people and show them what's right. Poke holes in their truth and just look at things through objective facts. And so, yeah, I spend my days thinking about Bitcoin and sovereignty, and then I get
Yeah.
to hang out with my wife and 4 kids around that, and I'm super lucky. I've got a great life.
That's totally. I mean, and it sounds like you've actually designed your own life. You've been intentional with all of your decisions to get to where you are today. But I'm actually interested in knowing what was your awakening? How did you even come to the concept of being sovereign? And then when did you realize that that was something that you wanted to live out?
Yeah, I feel like probably my journey is backwards from what most people's journeys towards sovereignty will be like today. So I found Bitcoin really early. 2013, I was a 20-year-old
Yeah.
kid, just like, unaware of anything in the world, basically. I was a bartender, and
Those were the
and
days.
oh, tell me about it. It was like
Like,
I was just, like just hanging out, reading blogs, nerdy online forums, like whatever. And Bitcoin hit $100, and I was like, arrogant 20-year-old kid, like, look at this fake money. These idiots don't know anything. I'm gonna be the hero and just like bring them back to the fiat reality, right? Like, that's not how I thought at the time, but this is kind of my thinking at the time. And so you learn about Bitcoin, and you don't just learn about Bitcoin. It's economics, it's encryption, it's cryptography, it's the history of money, it's the whole thing. And so eventually figured, oh, hey, this is pretty cool. I'm not sold on it, but I'll try to buy some and figure out where it goes. And then, bought some, sold some, bought a Bitcoin ATM, kind of just ran down this path
wait, wait, wait,
of,
wait, wait, wait. You went straight into buying a Bitcoin ATM. Most
yeah,
people are like hardware wallet, like
no, no, no. I'm a
just buy the
savage.
ATM.
I
Wow, good for
think,
you.
well, I'm not sure there was hardware wallets, at least not that I
Oh
knew
yeah.
of at the time. It was early. Like there was one mobile app. The way to run like the way to get a Bitcoin wallet was to run a node. Like
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
really,
Yeah.
really early days. There was no infrastructure. And so yeah,
Or like
I'm a
even mining, like mining on your laptop.
yeah, it was GPU. So it kind of GPU mining was just exiting the Bitcoin lens. There was
Okay.
ASICs back then, but GPU mining was still possible. And that was actually so one of the first like I bought Bitcoin for the first time, had a terrible experience. I like back alley, met this guy. He was super like weird and jumped in my car. I gave him money. He like scanned my wallet and bolted. And I was like, oh, like that felt super bad. And then I've kind of just been always, everything I've ever owned has always been for sale almost immediately. And so Bitcoin was no different. So I immediately sold that Bitcoin I bought, or point 0.9 of it, and I made back $100 that I had spent. And I was like, this is great, 10%. Like,
Nice.
wow, look at me, I'm rich. And then started just kind of buying and selling it locally, and made some money. And the first thing that I bought with the money I'd made over the next few months, I made like less than 10 grand. But over the back then that was I was like. I think I made 40 grand a year bartending. So I was like, wow, like I am rolling in it. And I bought a GPU miner that mined Litecoin at the time. So, I'm revealing my like scam coin journey here. But I had that GPU miner mining in my garage, heating my garage all winter. It was minus 30 outside, and my garage was nice and toasty. I lived in a condo in Edmonton, and it was a nice toasty 15 degrees in the garage, because that miner was just churning. It was like making Litecoin, which I was, even back then I was converting it back into Bitcoin, so that's kind of cool. And yeah, it was just it was great. And then bought the Bitcoin ATM. We were one of the first ones in Canada, the first in Alberta, and that was super cool, learning how to set that up and just kind of going from there. But over the years, and as I grew the Bitcoin ATM network, I kind of started having problems with the bank. And like today, most people who know me. Like I am the most debanked man in Canada. I do not have a federal bank account. Most provincial credit unions have also banned me. I have a tiny credit union in Alberta that gives me a checking account. I'm not talking about debt. I'm not talking about a mortgage. I'm talking about a checking account so I can pay like
Wow.
my hydro bill and a mortgage. And so through that process, I realized, and it didn't happen all overnight. It was over the course of a few years where I would get a bank and they would close me down. I'd get a different bank and they would close me down. And then I had to start playing games. I started opening up, holding companies to get banks and funneling money through. And it was a mess.
And this
And
is all because of Bitcoin
yeah,
or Litecoin as well.
well, yeah, exactly. Mostly, I mean, broadly speaking, my involvement in the Bitcoin ecosystem has been obviously very public, and the proceeds of my
Mhm.
money is all from the Bitcoin ecosystem. And the banks, they never
Yeah.
told me why exactly, but I ultimately ended up, kind of being debanked. Which, to your question, that was when I realized, hey, doesn't matter how
Mm.
much money I have in the bank, doesn't matter what I've done in the past, my money will always be subject to the regime of the future. And I
Yep.
just don't trust the regime of the future. And even if it's perfect, even if it's like going to be this incredible, government that truly has the people's, best interests at heart, the risk that it won't be that, even if it's
Yep.
0.1% that it won't be that, it just my efforts, like the money I've saved, is being subject to that risk just was unacceptable. And so that's what radicalized me, so to speak.
Yeah, that's the awakening. And it's one thing to be debanked when it's just you, but then
Mhm.
when you have a family and you have obligations related to your kids, it's quite something else to have to deal with that reality.
Yeah, I mean, my wife, she also started being targeted. Like, my wife is she stays home with our kids. She doesn't have
Yeah,
an
that's
income.
nice.
Like,
Yeah.
as far it's super nice. But as far as the banking perspective, she should be pretty like pretty safe to bank. And she was out with for dinner with some friends one night. Went to use her credit card, and it's like declined, declined, declined. And she calls the bank and she's like, "Hey, like my card's declining. What's going on?" And they're like, "Oh, we've demarketed you. You don't bank here anymore." and she's just like trying to pay for dinner, and she's like, "What? When did this happen?" And they're like, "We made the decision, like blah blah blah," like the whole rigmarole. And so even my wife has been deplatformed from I think three of the five big banks, and so and
Wow.
she doesn't even. I think she might have a few shares in Bitcoin, but like her name is off, everything to do with the business, and it doesn't seem to matter. So it's pretty crazy how subjective this system is, and how centralized it is, and how much our society relies on the system. Because to your point, if you don't have a bank account, like even some places here in Edmonton and in Canada more broadly, you can't pay for things in cash anymore. I
Yep.
know that
Yep.
like in 2018, Canada passed a law recently, early over the last few years, that you couldn't pay your taxes in cash. And so there was a period of time where I owed, a substantial amounts of taxes, but had no bank account to pay it. So I was getting letters and like threats from the government, like pay your taxes, we're gonna seize your assets, blah blah blah. And first of all, I was like, well, I have no assets you can seize because I'm holding cash in Bitcoin. So it's like, good luck.
Take
But then
them, take
also,
them.
yeah, exactly. It's like, come on, like I've got the duffel bag ready for you, like whenever you want to get it. But then it just, again, it recognized, it opened my eyes to the fact that, the government doesn't even have their heads on straight. They're going to give the banks full power to choose who to do business with, and then mandate that society has to work with the banks. It's just this backward system that is totally not free whatsoever.
So 2013 was your starting point, and I think you're in such a cool position because I mean, you started very early in 2013. You immediately got into the business side of things. So you have the perspective of both business owner, operator, and user. And you've had, what, 11 years now, which, as we referenced earlier, is like probably 30 years
Yeah.
in any other industry. When did you first start to see a shift in tone with respect to institutions and perhaps small governments? Like, is this really, is 2020 really the year where all of this change started to happen? Or did you see like glimpses of this happening before then?
Yeah, definitely saw glimpses. I'd say 2017 was kind of when my
Yeah,
eyes opened to like, whoa, this is going to be insane. And
yeah.
I'm not sure I saw countries like, El Salvador happening that soon back in 2017. But in 17, I started getting phone calls from, like executives at oil and gas companies being like, hey, can you come to our office and talk to us about Bitcoin and show us how to buy it? And I was like, whoa, like here
Yeah.
I am trying to orange pill the cafe owner, and we've got this
Yeah.
guy in charge of a $500 billion company looking to figure out how to buy Bitcoin. It's like, okay, this is the real deal. And especially being in Edmonton here, oil and gas entrepreneurs they are built for Bitcoin. Bitcoin
Hmm.
is and oil and gas go together so well. And so seeing that happen, meeting with these guys in cafes and coffee shops, or going to their big offices and trying to, just chatting with them, understanding, why they're interested in Bitcoin, made me realize the problem, like, and at that time, I'm still kind of a young entrepreneur, no real perspective on life at that point. And I realized then the problem for them wasn't making money, it was saving money. They
Yeah.
couldn't, like, their biggest problem was, what do we do with all of this cash that is just evaporating under our noses? And that was even pre, the pandemic print, and like
Yeah.
pre this historic amount of money entering the market. There was a problem even back then. And so that was kind of what opened my eyes to the fact that this is not just some cypherpunk degenerate dream. This is bigger. This is part of what the world is going to need to actually escape the grips and the confines of what we call now fiat. Um,
Hmm.
and then, like, through that time, I'm being debanked, and kind of all of this stuff happening at once in 2017, 2018, really helped me open my eyes to, hey, you've got a few dozen Bitcoin ATMs in Western Canada. Like, buckle up, because we can probably attach ourselves to a rocket ship here and start blasting off.
That is so amazing. And so, amongst your like family, friends, I guess peers from the bar, Were there other people who were as enthusiastic about Bitcoin as you, or were you just like this solo rider?
Yeah, probably a solo rider is a better way to describe me. I lots of my friends now do own Bitcoin, and I've like you don't get to hang out with me and not hear about it all the time. And as you can tell, I'm like quite boisterous. I'm quite energetic, and
Yeah,
and when I get passionate about something, I just speak about it. But it's also caused, especially early on, lots of like disagreements.
yeah,
More so with, I'd say, my friends' parents started watching me like accumulate wealth and like kind of like start my rocket ship ride as as an entrepreneur, but also as a Bitcoin holder. And they started getting, it was like challenging me, like, oh, you better take the money off the table, like all right, your time is done, like get out while you can, like. And I was kind of like explaining to them, no, 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 here's how money works, and here's why the print is bad, and here's how inflation works, and here's like I would say things in 2017, 2018, like, well, what happens if the banks don't give you your money? Well, why would that ever happen? We're in Canada,
yeah.
this is a first world nation, like, how dare you think that these giant banks that are too big to fail, all the terminology that you hear. And then I was kind of just like, you know all right, like, I'm here when you want to chat, but please stop trying to convince me that Bitcoin is not going to change the world, because it is. And so there was definitely some friction there. My parents, hilariously, like, they were never against. My parents have been amazing to letting me, follow my dream, my passion, whatever it's going to be. But the only way that the way they acquired their first Bitcoin was, we went to New York for my mom's birthday, and my dad like paid for the trip, and then I was going to pay him back when we got home. And so my then like my wife, she was my, I think we've been married a couple of years actually. And so my wife and I go, and my mom and dad and some of their friends, and we're all in New York, have this great time. We get back, my dad's like, all right, you owe me a couple $1,000. And I was like, okay, listen, I'm not giving you money, I'm giving you Bitcoin. And it's like, and he's frustrated. He's like, that wasn't the deal. Like, and my parents are, they're not like loaded rich, but they're, they weren't hurt. Like, the $2,000 probably didn't make much of a difference to their day to day. So I felt, comfortable. Like, it wasn't like he was looking for his mortgage payment. Like, it was okay. And I was like, this is it. Like, you're getting Bitcoin or you're getting nothing. So you may as well take the Bitcoin. So I get a hardware wallet. We set it up. I sent him the Bitcoin. I sent him over 2 Bitcoin for that trip to New York. And,
Lucky.
and then not even the year later, it was less than a year later, Bitcoin goes to like $20,000 Canadian. And he was like, whoa. And he's talking to me. He's like, okay, like, I'm in now. Do we sell? Like, we just 20x'd our investment here in 12 months. Like, fiat mindset, right? This is insane. We should sell. And I was like, okay, well, let's walk through this. Where are you going to put the money? What's it going to go into? He's like, mutual
Exactly.
funds, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, look, you have those. They're not growing that fast. This is programmatic, perfect money protocol. Why would you sell that? And that was when, the mindset started shifting. And so they've been buying over time. And I remember they had some business success, and they wanted to buy some Bitcoin when it was around 50K. And he was like, I can't believe we're getting fractions of a Bitcoin right now. And it's so true. It's
Your
it's it's
dad's
like,
no G fractions. What is this?
yeah, 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 exactly. It's like, this is preposterous. And so yeah, it's been cool to watch the journey of, my peers, my parents, my friends kind of understand more what Bitcoin is. And then, like, they've heard my story, but seeing what's going on here in Canada, understanding, hey, the banks are freezing accounts for donations to truckers. Hey, my e-transfers aren't going through like they said they would. Why is the bank taking 5 days to deposit a bank draft? I thought that was as good as cash. How come my wire transfer is being questioned all the time? Like, they're starting to see, whoa, like, this banking system is not really for me, is it? It's for the government, and I just happen to use it. And now this concept that Bitcoin is to get rich is there. It exists, but it's transitioning into Bitcoin is to stay free, which I think is very important.
Yeah, most definitely. And I wanted to ask you your thoughts on what's happening. Sorry, it's so dry in here. I think it's the cold weather. But the
You and I
thoughts
both we're
on,
both like struggling to speak.
yeah,
We got the northern dryness.
I've got my water, but I wanted to get your thoughts on what's happening because speaking of freezing bank accounts, Chrystia Freeland resigned
Yes,
in the most dramatic way yesterday with the
on
letter and
par.
stuff. So do you think that Trudeau will end up resigning? Um, or not being reelected? I think, well,
Yeah.
so first part, and then second part, is Canada ready for a leader who embraces Bitcoin?
Yeah, I think Canada is not. I mean, I'll answer that part briefly, quick. It's not ready. It's desperate for a leader
Yeah.
that embraces Bitcoin. But personally, I think like my views on the Trudeau Freeland situation are that Trudeau is just his whole head. Like imagine a man that can't swim underwater. His head is underwater, and he's just like sloshing around in the water, trying to figure out what to do to save his pathetic career. And I think that his like public request for her to resign is just one more. He's run out of bullets in the chamber. There's not many
Hmm.
more people he can start blaming the catastrophic state of Canada. And I think that he is just, yeah, gripping on for dear life. I also think he's the type of man that would blame absolutely anybody
Yeah.
for the problem. I made a joke the other day to someone. I just kind of mentioned, like, I think he would blame his ex-wife for what's going on
Yeah.
before he took accountability, and maybe even his children. Like he might look and be like, well,
Yeah.
my kids were just bugging me for the last 10 years, and that's why I wasn't focused on Canada. If it wasn't for them, we'd be fine. Like I fully believe that he's the type of man that just has a hard time taking accountability and responsibility for the pathetic and poor decisions that he's made over the last decade. And he's going to keep on, pointing the gun at whoever he can to try to save face. Ultimately, though, I think that what's next for Canada is still, to be determined. I think that there's a lot of interesting things happening in our North American,
Yeah.
geopolitical environment.
Most
I know that like
definitely.
in Alberta, we've got a premier who is incredibly based. She understands sovereignty and freedom. She just passed a few months ago the Sovereignty Act, kind of like cementing property rights for owners and gun laws. And she's
Oh,
really like,
wow.
yeah, it's been very very positive. And so there's there's also quite a divide in Canada. We've got multiple different industries. We're a huge country, and it doesn't. It's tough to federally regulate that vast and that diverse of
Yep.
a
Yep.
a landscape. And it works in the U.S. because the states have so much power, but in Canada, provinces have hardly any power. We don't, we don't make our own laws per province for the most part. We've got some different tax laws, and there's some different property stuff that we can do. But for the most part, we're federal. We're a giant federation that then has like some provincial input or influence. And I think that we're probably going to see lots of discussion and movement towards Canada kind of like breaking up as a country. I think that we're going to start looking at ways to better capitalize on the resources that we have, understanding that this vast of a nation, it's just difficult to govern
Yeah.
and regulate. You can't regulate the Rocky Mountains the same way, and the oil the same way you regulate Hudson's Bay and the way that imports come in. And
Yep.
so yeah, and so that said, who's going to be the federal leader that wants to break up like that's not really a bullet point you want on your resume, so to speak. So it's going to be interesting to see kind of what goes on and how two people, like both conservative leaders in Alberta and federally coming in, they might be at odds in that way. Our premier might be like, hey, we want to bolt and take our resources, and he'll be like, whoa,
You can't
what
do
can we do to
that.
help?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It might be a good
So
negotiation. It's I like the fact that you bring up like gun laws, for example, because growing up in Toronto, my whole thing was guns were bad because
Mm,
I only saw them in a violent context.
yeah.
I mean, no one in Toronto is going hunting. Like, we
No.
don't have that type of,
Exactly. That's a
outdoor.
great point. Of course not.
So my opinion was very biased and very
Why do
context
you need a gun?
specific. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then I moved here to Switzerland where I mean the guns per capita is just astronomical.
Yeah.
So many people have guns. And one of my daughter's friend's father actually teaches shooting. And he was like, Saida, you should come to the shooting range one day. And I looked at him and I was like, you know what? I should. Like,
Yeah.
I need to really test myself and push my boundaries and, test my assumptions. All of these things that I've learned, this conclusion that I've made, let me go and see what it's actually like. So I shot a rifle and a pistol.
How'd it go?
And okay, so I did not know that I would have to master breathing so much with the rifle. Aiming, finding the right position and everything, like it took me a long time. I think I may have shot 3 or 4 bullets and I was like, I need I
Need a
need a
break.
break.
Yeah, it's
So
no
that
joke.
it is serious. Like it totally made me reconsider my thought. I'm like, this is truly a sport. And then the pistol, it wasn't that far, and he's a really good teacher, so I managed to hit the target a few times, and I quite enjoyed it. And so, going back to what you're saying, it is difficult to have one law apply across such a diverse country like Canada,
Yeah.
where the cultures and the context are totally different.
Yeah, completely. And I think too, even more broadly than that, like we've we or they as a collective group, the opposers to the gun have done a great job, inputting that input that guns are only for evil.
Yeah,
And I actually, I could probably get on board with that. I think that like it's one thing to look at guns as like a tool for hunting, which obviously it is. And whenever like I own some land here in Alberta, and I've got friends that go out and they hunt on it, and I've got a steak tax. So if they get a deer, I get steak. If they get a moose,
yeah,
I get steak. It's a win-win. And that's one side of guns. But I can get on board with that this generalized concept that guns are only there for evil. And if you believe
yeah,
that, you should want a gun because one side of the aisle, one side of the opposing group will always have guns. And if you actually believe, all guns are evil, all guns are bad, and you understand that only one group of people have guns, then you realize how unfair that is and how much
mm,
corruption is possible in that way. And if the government is the only group of people that has the guns, then we as citizens will be slaves forever. And
yeah,
this mindset that the government are just by default the good guys, and that by default they should have the most power is so
yeah,
backwards. History has taught
yeah,
us time and time and time again that when you centralize power and give it to someone, they're going to screw you over. This is what we've seen. If you read the Bible, that's what the Bible has shown us time and time again. If you look at the history books of like the Roman collapse and nonstop, everywhere you look, it's like, what happened to that society? Why did they suck? Oh, someone got greedy and tried to take advantage of everyone, and then then there was a war, and now here we are. It's like,
there he goes again. Yeah,
literally. So it's like, like I own guns, and the reason I own guns and the measurement of my success with as a gun owner will be never having to use them, because I know how to use
yeah,
them. I know where they are. I know that they're there and good and ready for me to use. But if I never have to use them, that is the utmost season of like accomplishment and success. And I truly believe that as a society we should look at guns in that way. Everyone needs to know how to use them, because when you need to, holy smokes, do you need to? You have very little time to be farting around with
yeah,
the safety and the pump on the shotgun, or like the scope on a rifle, and like you got to learn how to use that. And
yeah,
so I think it's very important that we recognize, guns are not about it's not about letting the evil people not have something. it's about leveling the playing field so that the good and the evil people have the same opportunity to protect themselves or to go on offense, if needed. And it's my opinion that the good people will never, ever go on offense. They will always be on defense from the evil people. And taking away the
Yeah.
tools to prevent evil is just dumb.
Yep, definitely. The other thing that really surprised me is that at the shooting range, so here it's called the stand de tir, the shooting like
Man,
stand.
everything you hear in French, or like, I'm not sure, is that French? I
It's
assume.
French, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
everything you hear in French just sounds better, hey?
Stand de tir. But there were people of all ages
Yeah,
and men, women. I was surprised. Like, I saw a few people who I encounter on the street here and there. Never in a million years would I have guessed that they even know how to hold a gun. And I
right?
saw them and they mastered everything. And I was like, wow, this is a whole other universe
Yeah.
where again, all of the stereotypes that I had were totally like just shot out the window. They didn't apply whatsoever.
Yeah, and good for you for having that open. I think that's one of the greatest downfalls of our world right now is the ability to just stereotype an
Yeah.
industry or a group of people into like, every gun owner wants to kill other people. It's like, no, actually,
Yeah, yeah.
au contraire, like that's not quite the case at all. And to your point, like I think that's the sign of a healthy society because there's a level of respect that you have
Yeah.
to, if you know for a fact everyone in your town knows how to use a gun, you are not going to break into anybody's house in that town. It's just, it would just be foolish to do so. It's like, well, I know that these people are gun owners, know how to use them, and so therefore I'm going to do less violence or try to take advantage of less people because I don't have an advantage anymore. I don't have the ability to truly take advantage of this person because they can clap right back at me. And I think that's a healthy place to be as a society where we all have mutual ability and mutual respect for each
Yeah.
other.
Yep. And I would say that Switzerland is pretty safe. Like,
Yeah.
there are a few neighborhoods here around the train station that are like, I don't feel comfortable being there at night anymore.
Right.
Things have changed. Unfortunately, it seems as though a lot of drugs have come in as well, and it's concentrated in that area. But other than that, like, I feel so safe here. And not everyone, but a high percentage of people, like they all have guns, and I feel
Right.
very safe. And that respect, it's not like in your face. It's not like, again, the
No.
stereotypes that I grew up with. It's really that calm consistency, like low key Swiss. Don't mess with me because if you do,
It's like,
you're gonna
hey, be
pay.
careful.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, I
So,
think I think it's
oh,
great.
go ahead.
No, I think it's great that you're able to, even after being indoctrinated. It gives me so much hope for the world that you're able to like exit the indoctrination. I also think too, just lastly to touch on like that feeling of adrenaline you felt the first time. I think that there's a flood of emotions that go through someone when they realize, like, first of all, being a gun instructor is probably one of the most dangerous jobs in the world. Like, you've got someone with life-ending tools in their
Yeah.
hands for the first time beside you.
So true.
It's like it's like when you like he's handing the power to you and being like, "All right, let me show you how to use life-ending tools." And like I'm going to be the one who's in the nearest vicinity if this goes wrong. Like that's insane. And so you have this like inherent trust that he's given you, which is like,
Yeah.
lots of confidence. And then, the first time you like pull the trigger towards that piece of paper and down the range, you realize everything you've been taught has been wrong, how much more difficult it is, how much more respect you have for the gun. It is truly an emotional experience, and it kind of draws you towards sovereignty. Like
Yeah.
you feel more powerful. You feel like you've got a level playing field with the oppressors for kind of like one of the first times. And it's a surreal experience. Everyone watching, I recommend
Yeah.
just go to a gun range, do it safely, take a course,
Yeah.
but experience that because it is very, very important.
I fully agree. And women, like if you grew up like me, seriously give it a try because it really puts things into perspective, and you think, hey, wait a minute, like, this actually takes work. The
Yeah.
rifle takes work. It takes muscles. It's so much more. Like, killing is almost secondary, if you will.
Oh yeah, for sure. No, I think that's phenomenal insight. Yeah, it's a highly recommended activity.
Yeah. So another highly recommended activity. I hope you like that segue.
That was a great segue.
Um, a company adding Bitcoin to the balance
Yes.
sheet. Highly
Highly
recommended.
recommended activity. I 10 out of 10 recommend. It's like go shoot a gun, then go buy some Bitcoin and like go to bed happy, baby. Like you know what?
So
Yeah,
there's a reason we call you the Canadian Michael Saylor, because this is something that you've embarked on. Can you, I guess, for anyone who's not familiar with what this actually means, some people don't know what a balance sheet is. Can you give us sort of like the TLDR of what this is and what it means?
yeah. So effectively, a balance sheet is like the total list of assets that a company or frankly an individual owns against all of its debt. So a personal balance sheet would look like I own a house that's worth
Hmm.
500 grand and I owe $400,000 in a mortgage, and therefore the sum of those things is my balance sheet. And just like a corporation might own, like we as a corporation, we own Bitcoin ATMs, we own office and furniture, and I'm looking at some plants and some lights and some cameras and all this stuff. Those are all considered assets, things that we own. And recently we've added Bitcoin to that list of assets. And so we've decided, every company is faced with a choice, and that choice looks like, hey, we've got some cash, or we have some opportunity to get cash.
Hmm.
What are we going to do with it? We're going to buy more cameras, more ATMs, hire more people to develop our software. What are we going to do? And we've elected to allocate a portion of our assets towards buying Bitcoin. And this is a nod to our shareholders. And I think anyone that buys Bitcoin, it's a nod to the shareholders that we are planning and protecting our assets for the long term. Um, throughout the last kind of couple years of being public, we've gone through the ups and downs. Our share price has been decimated.
Yeah.
We took on, way too much debt to keep the ship afloat and go through it. And our balance sheet, so to speak, is in, it was in rough shape. We had lots of debt, diminishing revenue, and it was problematic. And so we stayed the course. We reduced our size. We focused on what was important, and kind of drove through. And now, kind of the second phase of that is adding Bitcoin to be able to, continue to weather future storms. And on top of that, being a public company, this is where kind of the Michael Saylor strategy gets in. Because obviously, you know, taking excess cash and buying Bitcoin is the most important thing. If you are a business that generates cash flow, you need to investigate allocating a portion of excess cash to buy Bitcoin. And this is simply to preserve purchasing power. Obviously, cash you need in the next 6 months, not a great spot to
Yep.
put into Bitcoin. Cash you need in the next 6 years, if it's not in Bitcoin, you're a fool. Like that's kind of
Hmm.
the delta. And then your success will come in finding the balance in between. And so as a public company, we have opportunities to issue equity to the market to get more cash. And we've kind of, taken the Saylor approach and then dreamt up a bit of a spin or a bit of a unique twist, which will, kind of is possible for us in a way that it wouldn't be necessarily, or maybe it's possible for MicroStrategies, but they're able to do more things than we are. We're like a small micro cap company here in Canada, so we have different opportunities
Yep.
than what the QQQ. And so we've dreamt up a way to issue a debt instrument, and debt is, I'm like pretty anti-debt. Just being burnt by debt in the past, I have some strong views and beliefs in the morality of debt, even. However, this debt all converts into equity at a future date. All the interest rate is paid in equity at a future date, and really, kind of justified in my mind, anyways. It is an equity instrument, so we get to basically issue equity at a future date and pay for the cost of the debt in equity in order to buy Bitcoin. And what we've been able to do is take our business, which is a growing Bitcoin enterprise. which a platform live in Canada and USA, and issue equity to want to be shareholders or soon to be shareholders. And the shareholders are happy because we're taking their money and buying Bitcoin. And also, we're finding the balance of how much do we buy Bitcoin with and how much do we, invest in our business. And our success comes in finding that balance. And then again, the shareholder gets equity in a company that owns Bitcoin and is also building Bitcoin infrastructure. And so they kind of get like turbocharged Bitcoin experience or Bitcoin exposure, which is super great. While noting like that turbocharged exposure comes at a risk because they have to trust that I'm like going to do the right things, that our team will be able to execute on the things that I say we're going to do, that we're going to be able to tell the market about it, that we're not going to, take the cash, buy some Bitcoin, and then just executive bonuses and company trips,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so there is a trust and a risk there, and that turbocharged experience, as far as the risk reward scenario and relationship is concerned, frankly, I think if you want turbocharged experience to Bitcoin, buying debt that converts into equity in a Bitcoin company holding Bitcoin, there's very few better opportunities to have turbocharged exposure to Bitcoin. So I'm pretty excited about it. It's definitely unique. We went out for our first round of this convertible debt issuance. We started a couple weeks ago, and it went very, very well.
Yeah.
But hilariously, we had issues with, wouldn't you know it, the compliance department at the banks. And they were like,
Oh, wow.
whoa, this is the first time we've seen this. What is this structure? We had to get like special approvals and the whole bit. It's, being the first guy through the wall is typically the bloodiest. And we are the first person or the first company in Canada offering an instrument like this, especially in our micro cap space. And so it's reminiscent of us going public a couple years ago. We were the first non-custodial Bitcoin company to go public, which was a host of problems and costs and legals and accounting, regulations. And now we're the first ones to be offering this type of instrument. And I think that over the next 5 years, this will be commonplace. It will be, here's debt. It's backed by my equity. My equity is partially, backed by the Bitcoin that we hold. And eventually there will come a time where the Bitcoin that we've bought this year in 10 years will be larger than our entire market cap today. And so there's kind of a safe bet where, let's say operations ceased and everything sucked and, things went really, really wrong for the vision that we've cast and our ability to execute on that vision. It's like with a low enough time preference and long enough time frame, we're still pretty safe.
Yep, definitely. So you were the first company to go public, Bitcoin company to go public in Canada.
So
Go
we were
ahead.
the first non-custodial company.
Non-custodial. Okay.
So there was other companies, like there was some Bitcoin miners. I think the first Bitcoin miner was from Alberta, the same province that we were in. But we were the first non-custodial Bitcoin company to go public. And the key difference there for anyone that doesn't know is we don't hold customer Bitcoins ever. If Bitcoin Well unplugged its servers right now, no notice, it was done, there would be 0 customer Bitcoins lost. And, we went public in 2021. And the number one question we got from the auditors and the exchanges and the bankers was, what is your process? What is your custody process? And it took us months to go through the process of the fact that we do not hold, they could not get around it. How are you guys a Bitcoin company that doesn't hold customer Bitcoins? It didn't make sense. They're like, surely you hold it. No, we don't. And, we get this list of questionnaires and it was like, well, what happens to the customer Bitcoin if X, Y, and Z happens? And it's like, nothing, because we don't own customer Bitcoin. And it was really eye-opening to just, the first guy through the wall, right, kind of mentality, like you get the bloodiest. And it was eye-opening to how, that small nuanced change really drastically changed the perception of the whole business, like for the better in my mind.
Yeah. So In their process of trying to figure out why it is your company does not custody Bitcoin, did they actually go to an ATM and experience a paper wallet or sweeping Bitcoin from a paper wallet to get what the process is?
I think so. There was certainly a couple of the prospect investors and bankers that went and used the machine. Because and at that time we were only Bitcoin ATMs. We didn't have our Bitcoin portal yet. We just started
Yeah.
that building that in 2022. So at the time it was Bitcoin ATMs only, and so yeah, they went there and understood kind of what it means. But again, like to them as the layman, they were like, I don't get it. When I buy Bitcoin on Coinbase, it also goes into my wallet. And it's like, you don't fully
Yeah.
understand, do you? Like your wallet
Yeah.
in Coinbase is Coinbase's wallet with your name on it. Your wallet that you used at the Bitcoin ATM is your wallet that no one else can touch. And that distinction is just it's lost on TradFi. It's
Yeah.
completely lost on anyone that is used to having my money sit in the bank or sit in custody of somebody else. And so I think that over time, it became apparent. I had a lot of early investors calling me saying, like, yo, this non-custodial model is weird. No one cares. Like, doesn't matter. Ditch it. You'll be bigger. And then FTX happened, months later. And I was, now we get calls like, wow, I understand. And like the business is opposite, right? Like a custodial model is completely opposite of a
Hmm.
non-custodial model. In fact, the largest revenue stream for lots of these custodial exchanges is just holding the money. and
Yeah, of
so
course. Yep.
and so for us, like we've got the business model down pat. Yes, it was slower to grow, but this is where the puck is going, so to speak. And we're miles ahead of the competition in terms of being able to offer the best non-custodial product in the world.
So you use the analogy of being the first through the door or the first through the
Yeah.
wall is the bloodiest.
Yeah.
Um, as a kid growing up, what prepared you for this life where you're getting bloodied all the time because you're the first to burst through?
Yeah. Oh man, what prepared me? I'm not sure if like I was necessarily intentional or my parents were intent. I probably actually my upbringing was very positive in that I've always had a problem with authority. Always. This is natural. I don't think this was learned. This was like my mom remembers arguing with me when I was young, like 7, 8 years old, and I would catch her. She tells a story, like so. This is not my words; these are her words. But I would catch her in logic. Like I would like out logic her at that young age, and she would just be like, "Oh, I hate that you're right now because you're 7 and this is very annoying and I want you to do what I want you to do." Like, but to her credit and to my dad's credit, they allowed me to challenge them. And I don't think they were perfect. Like there was sometimes where it was just like, just be quiet and do the thing. It doesn't make sense to you, but that's fine. You have to do it. And that was also healthy, realizing
Hmm.
that there's a time and a place to challenge the authority. But I definitely was empowered to ask questions, challenge, and use my experience, as limited as it was, and my perception to like shape my opinions and my thoughts, I guess. And so that was really, really positive, and I just leaned into that. And then, you know, the thing that was missing though was my ability, my attention to detail, I would say. Like not because I
Hmm.
wasn't necessarily detailed, but just I always thought at a very, very high level and had a hard time kind of bringing that down. And so I was actually working at one of the restaurants here, like my first real job out of high school. And on day one, we went through what they called attention to detail training. And I was just like, for months thereafter, trained. Every time I walk around the restaurant, I had to look for 5 things. 5 things that were wrong that had to be changed, as small as they were. And like, that was life changing. It took a while to figure out how to apply that in a healthy
Hmm.
way. But when you go through an environment trained to look for things that can be improved, you're forced, like, especially over time, like, as you improve things, it gets harder to spot things that need to be improved. And so I'm
Yeah.
now very, very good at having a quick glance and just like boom, 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 boom. And then knowing, and then the next step to that, like the third step there is knowing how to change it. And I'd say that I'm now leaning into that phase of the process where it's like, all right, question the authority or the principles that are there, figure out which thing is not abiding by the logic principles, and then action it as fast as possible. And I'm just now starting to lean into that third process, and it's been, yeah, it's been a fun journey for sure.
I can imagine. And so, question the authority. What happens when one day Bitcoin is totally ubiquitous and entrepreneurs like yourself become the authority because you've been there from the beginning and you've been building for so long, 11 years, but still in the
Yeah.
land of Bitcoin, it's a long time. So let's say 20 years out, you become the authority. What happens then?
Yeah, I mean, centralization creates corruption. Like I hope, and I pray that the future of the world is a world that strives for and demands rules, but not rulers.
Oh,
And honestly,
that's my
as
saying.
a
Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
like
Yeah.
bless
Rules, not
up,
rulers. Yeah.
we I think that Bitcoiners too, this is part of like we have to practice what we preach.
Hmm.
We need to push each other to continue to decentralize, to continue to challenge our authority, and hopefully Bitcoiners get the shaft. Hopefully, the end goal is not having the big stick that can reign over people. Hopefully it's quietly inputting protocols from the back end that just govern the world better. And we started with the money protocol. That was very
Hmm.
even back further. Like the printing press was the first kind of protocol. I can take one thing and make it two things, and I open that technology to anyone. That's amazing. And now we are no longer reliant on a single voice from, a corrupt group of people. That's great. And then the second piece is the money. Well, how do we decentralize the money? And then we've got the Bitcoin, the money protocol. And so now we've got the ability to at least duplicate anything. We can make multiple copies. And we've got the ability to lock our energy, our time in a protocol. And the third piece in my mind is the media, is the way that we distribute both the
Yeah.
money and the voices, the things that we print. The distribution of that has to move in a way that is protocol driven, like the Nostr protocol and et cetera. And so I feel like there's going to be a call on the OGs, and on the people that are interested in Bitcoin to be philanthropic with their time and efforts to move the world towards a better place. And I actually think that's probably the biggest benefit, the biggest unsung benefit that like the Bitcoin standard, a life on a Bitcoin standard will bring, is that when you no longer are forced to invest, to gamble
Hmm.
on, to preserve your energy, preserve your power, you have the ability, the luxury to invest your capital in projects that you think will bring value to the world. And when you become
Yeah.
a mission focused investor, not
Yeah.
just a value focused investor, like your scope for who you will invest with is tiny because it has to be aligned with core principles,
Yeah.
which
Most
means
definitely.
as the entrepreneur, I am forced to have good core principles.
Hmm.
And it's like I'm no longer just competing on how much fiat I can gain, which, frankly, you can lie, cheat, and steal to gain fiat. I am now going to be judged and measured. My success will be measured on how good of a human being, how good of a business leader, how much value and how much better do I make the world. And
Hmm.
that is just how healthy of an environment is that to play in. And so I think that, the authority will look like people that have a vision of what they want the world to be, and then allocate capital towards others that have that same vision. And the free market will bring about the best vision. And I think we'll have the luxury of transitioning from a few group of people making that decision to a lot of people making a true
Yeah.
free market in making that decision, which is just amazing.
Yeah, it's since the Roger Ver interview and his book that came out and all the noise that's like circulating about that, I started to read The Block Size Wars by I
Nice.
think it's Jonathan Beer again. And I'm looking at or just reading because you talked about communications. And is it was his name Thamos, who was the moderator on our Bitcoin on Reddit?
Yeah.
And the fact that he said, like he set the parameters around the discussion and we're not allowed to talk about certain things and the community reaction to that. So again, like the voice and the influence, who can say what, when, who decides and stuff. And I kind of feel as though in an interesting way, we're kind of seeing these things play out again. Like history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes.
Yeah.
And on, is it the Robin Sear podcast? He had, I forget his name, he had a guest on who's been in the Bitcoin space for quite some time, who was saying that he's noticed that with Twitter, it's totally turned into an echo chamber
Yes.
where you'll find people agreeing with the person that they deem has the most authority or the person that they can relate to the most, as opposed to actually like looking at the technical breakdown of an issue. So I'm curious to see how that aspect of things will play out.
Yeah, I mean, this is a societal shift that needs to happen is this concept of having a hero or having
Yeah,
a person that you trust and respect so much that everything they say is right. And I feel like it's fine to have influence and it's good to
hmm
have people influence you. But everything that you hear and act on has to go through your own like
hmm
logic center. And you have to approach things like I have a lot of respect for a lot of people in the space that I disagree with. And
yeah,
I have the luxury of publicly disagreeing with them and then also still seeing them at a Bitcoin conference and having a coffee and having a great
yeah,
conversation because we have this, they can see my side and I can see their side because both of us are logic focused. It's like, look,
hmm
I disagree with your perspective or with your perspective, but if I had that perspective, I would agree with you. And a hot topic in the Bitcoin community, in my opinion, is this concept of like Jesus and this concept of God. And
hmm
there's a camp of Bitcoiners that are don't trust, verify, God's not real, you can't verify
yeah,
that, off you go.
yep,
And there's the camp which I happen to fall in, which is like, Bitcoin is from God and God has decreed a protocol over the world and your Bitcoin journey actually leads you to Jesus. And
hmm
there's these two camps that you know both have logic
yeah,
backing them and neither have absolute, and that's okay. And I think that
exactly.
if I get along very well with the people that don't trust, verify, and I just I gently ask them questions that they can't answer and they gently ask me questions that I can't answer, and then we dap up and say this was great and you've given me lots to think about, and then off we go. And I think that that's like a healthy state. And so I see it in the OGs, I see it in the people that I communicate with, and I'm so bullish that will continue and lead on as long as more leaders, to your point, are comfortable having those conversations and being able to actually like respond in a way that is humble and respond. Like even my journey, I was publicly anti micro strategy months ago, and I went through a rigorous like exploration phase. I was on Twitter Spaces, taking the opposite position. And there's some things in MicroStrategy that I continue to disagree with, but the shift in my perspective came from, this is not really debt. This is an equity product. This is
Yeah,
equity masked as debt, and that like that gap that I had, but my openness to see that radically shifted.
yeah,
And my shareholders, our team members, my family, we're all better off because of it. And I feel like it's constant desire to change with a constant
yeah, and to
desire to think
learn.
things through,
Yep.
and the world will be fine. But you're right, we have to get there, and it is a risk of centralization of echo chambers, and then it becomes camps, and like the block
Yeah.
size wars was kind of the first one where it was like, I'm a big blocker, I'm a small blocker, and as soon as you name a camp, you're screwed. It's
Yep.
like we're done. And this is like Bitcoin maxi kind of vibes, like like, and then being toxic inside that. It's just like, don't tie your identity to a feeling. Tie it
Yeah.
to just like logic. And I
Yep.
think that that's the most important thing we can do.
I have to say though that the concept of like being a toxic maxi is something that I personally appreciate because I don't mind being adversarial. I don't mind being
No.
challenged. I like to argue, I like to debate and stuff. But more tangibly, when I first came across Bitcoin in 2017, and I was on my path of discovery of learning what is Bitcoin, why are there so many other coins, the voice of two people who were at the time considered quite toxic and perhaps still today, Max Kaiser and Stacey Herbert, would
Yeah.
come back to me. And so it'd be like, whoa, what is this? You know? And so it was that pause that I needed in order to learn more and to say, okay, well, no, thank you to your ICO, whatever. No, thank you to this. And so I personally don't take sort of that toxicity personally. I look at it more as an opportunity to say there's passion here, what's behind it.
Yeah.
But yeah, but it's the whole like still, as you say, taking the step back and just not labeling everyone so that you fall into these camps and you totally lose your ability to reason and to get to the truth of something.
Oh, completely. And I think that you're an anomaly in your ability to be humble. Most people, when challenged in that way, in my experience, anyways, they just turn it off and they dig heels in sand, and it becomes, I find people like lose their ability to logic in the
Yeah.
wake of like being called names or whatever. And that like I think Max and Stacy definitely have some toxic traits. But more the toxicity that I'm talking about is like, you know, the Bitcoiner that like have fun staying poor language,
Mhm.
and that like ah, whatever, screw you, you are no longer important and you don't agree with me, so I'm out of here. And I feel like that has to change. I liken that to the street corner preacher who's like, you're going to hell, and like it's like who's going to Jesus, with that, like who's hearing that guy in the corner and being like, oh, I want to hear what he's got to say, like the guy screaming blasphemy and like terror from the street probably isn't attracting a lot of like healthy followers. And I would maybe just call Bitcoiners to like, hey, you know I don't think that toxicity will push everyone away,
Yeah.
but I think that
Yeah.
kindness will probably pull more people in. And I'm kind of like in the camp of like, yo, let's not tell everyone they're going to hell. Let's just tell them that like, that like there's love. And then in the Bitcoin terms, it's like, hey, what if we just went like, yo, your money could look better if it looked like this, don't you agree? Rather than being like, screw you and have fun staying poor. You'll get Bitcoin at the price you deserve. It's like, there's just two camps. And like, to your point, I think that the passion that's there is best shown in that like hardcore,
Hmm.
have fun staying poor environment. And I think that hopefully we can find a way to be passionate and also like embody some kindness in that way. And there's probably a balance, right? If it's all gentle love and rainbows, then like, you'll never get anybody. And so there's a balance there to that respect. But yeah, it's just it's it's all balance at the end of the day, I
Yeah.
suppose.
I totally agree. I love that comparison. You're going to hell.
Yeah. It's
Never
like
heard that
he's a
before, but
toxic
I
street
love
corner
it.
preacher and I want nothing to do with him.
Totally. So, how do you stay humble? Because you have such great experience in the space, and someone with your resume or CV could easily just go off and be like, I know everything. What keeps you grounded?
Yeah, probably just like the self-awareness that I don't know everything.
Mm,
I'm super convinced that like 10 years ago, I thought I knew everything. And sitting here today, the man 10 years ago was an absolute idiot. And I'm also confident that I will think that in 10 years. And
mm,
so the pursuit of growth is very fulfilling for me, and being able to learn more, change my opinions. And I have a problem with inefficiency. And so I find it very inefficient to, logically know something is wrong and then
yeah.
wallow in it. And so it kind of like, it looks like humility, but if I'm being honest, it's just logic, focus, desire to be better. And it's like,
Hmm.
like this micro strategy thing recently, it's like, okay, I've made a lot of noise being anti-MSTR, but something just clicked, and I think that there's actually an opportunity to be better here. So I had to eat some humble pie, and
Yeah.
what happened? Well, the company bought some Bitcoin. We have a financing open, and our share price is up. And so it's sure, oh, Adam is so and I had a lot of praise on Twitter being yes, so humble of you, good for you. Lots of people were very positive around
Yeah.
it. And I'm I got a few $1 million in the bank because of this. Humble or not, I won.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
and that's, I think, Bitcoin aligning incentives. And so
Hmm.
for me, and I've also indoctrinated myself into truly being focused on not just the next generation, but I think about and pray for and talk about my great great granddaughter more than my grandkids, and just being in that mindset of the generation that I will not see, really really lowers your time preference and requires you
Hmm.
to be in this constant state of leveling up. And when you want to level up, you don't get to have
Yep.
an ego. You don't get to it just doesn't really make sense. And so,
100.
yeah, I'd say it's a combination of logic and desire and time preference, all things that, Bitcoin teaches you. And I've also, just kind of round it out, I have gone into everything very, very passionately. And then I usually go into things that won't work and then prove myself wrong to become an
Hmm.
advocate. And, I did it with Bitcoin. I've done it with lots of different things. And in that pursuit of truth, you realize that the faster you get to truth, the faster you can prove yourself wrong,
Hmm.
the better you will be tomorrow. And I think that's, I've made a career and generational wealth as a result of that. And why wouldn't you keep doing that?
Exactly, right? Yeah, it's evidence based. It's or
Yeah.
yep, outcomes
Yeah, it's super
based.
evidence based, and hopefully someone listening to this that's no, 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 I didn't experience that, so I can't. It's just try it. Prove
Yeah.
me wrong, right? If we're all in the pursuit of
Yep.
truth and we agree that truth is relatively objective, it's hey, if I'm doing this wrong, you got to let me know,
Yep.
because either I've been lucky for the last 11 years, or I'm onto something here. And
Yeah.
I invite you to not you but you the viewer. I
You.
invite you to also humble yourself, take a logic focused approach, and then drive through.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, thank you so much. And thank you for your patience again with my technical issues today as we
No,
approach Christmas.
this has
Can
been great.
you
Thank you.
remind everyone or tell the audience where they can find you on social media, the websites for your companies, etc.?
Yeah, so number one CTA that I've been after with everyone is just go to bitcoinwell.com. If you're in Canada and
Hmm.
USA, make an account and tell us how we can improve. I am thirsty
Oh,
for
nice.
Bitcoiner feedback. We're a non-custodial platform. We are early in the USA, and our Canadian product is really, really good. Our US product is getting better by the day. But at the end of the day, it's we need Bitcoiners to show us, we're one group of people with one lens, and we're still early. And so, we need to know, how do you want to use Bitcoin in self-custody? And are
Hmm.
we making that as easy as possible for you? So that's CTA number one. And if you only did that, I would be super, super happy. Of course, if you want to hear more of what I have to say, I'm on X at Adam O'Brien _. I'd love to have the Adam O'Brien handle, but someone has it and he's parked it, so I just can't have it. So Adam O'Brien _ on X or on Noster. So I'm a NIPO5 maxi, which means I am only going to tell you my verified NIPO5 address, which is adam@btcw.app. So if you search that on your Nostr client, adam@btcw, that's our stock ticker, .app. If you search that on your Nostr client, you'll see me pop up. Follow me there. I'm relatively active on Nostr, more active on X. And so, yeah, would love to just chat with everyone. It's been a pleasure chatting with you. And yeah, really excited for, more conversations like this.
Oh, most definitely. We'll have you back, especially if there's an election. If Trudeau gets
Yes.
replaced, I'd love to have you back to get your take on everything that's happening. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. Merry Christmas to you and your family.
Merry Christmas to you guys, too. Thank you so much. And yeah, have a great one and have a safe trip.